North America's trees are in trouble. From California's redwood forests in the west to the New Jersey pine barrens in the east, our trees are facing a number of threats, but there is one in particular that stands out amongst the others. Over the last 2 centuries, over 450 insect pests and pathogens have been accidentally introduced into the US and threaten well over 100 native tree species. Some of these introductions are epidemic, bringing widespread destruction and death to large populations of a particular species or forest type. These epidemics have far-reaching implications for our economy, causing billions of dollars in damages or lost ecological services each year. And despite these incredibly negative changes, most everyday people don't seem to notice, and it doesn't get much attention in the media. We have drastically changed many of our woodland ecosystems, and unfortunately, there are no signs of it slowing down. As globalization increases and more goods are shipped across the world than ever before, it's becoming nearly impossible to prevent these pests and diseases from wreaking havoc on our remaining natural areas. The current estimate is that there are about 2.5 new forest pests or pathogens introduced every single year in the US. So how and why does this happen, and why should we care? And is there any good hope for these trees in the future? In this video, I'm going to explore the ever-looming and shockingly prevalent threat that new pests and disease invasions bring to our nation's trees and ecosystems. I'll start by telling the story of the American chestnut, as this is perhaps the most well-known example of this problem. The American chestnut was arguably America's most charismatic tree. It was fast-growing, strong-wooded, and reached large, mature sizes of over 100 feet. The tree was a crucial part of many Native American cultures. It was also an incredibly valuable tree for wildlife. But in the early 1900s, a foreign fungus was accidentally introduced into the eastern US. In its native range in Asia, the fungus plays a minor role in infecting the native chestnut species there. It only affects the trees that are stressed out or declining, but when the disease accidentally arrived into the US, the fungus easily infected and attacked the American chestnut, and within just 50 years of its discovery in 1904 at the Bronx Zoo, it decimated nearly the entirety of the American chestnut population's nearly 4 billion trees. Today, about 120 years after the disease's introduction, and despite many great efforts from dedicated individuals, scientists, and organizations, we still haven't figured out how to reliably defeat this fungus and restore the tree to even a fraction of its former glory. This story is often considered one of the greatest human-caused ecological disasters in modern times, and unfortunately it's just the tip of the iceberg. Many other native species have suffered similar fates, and some are heading in that direction right now. For example, our Native American elm species have suffered great losses at the hands of 2 invasive fungi and a European elm bark beetle, collectively known as Dutch elm disease. Pennsylvania's state tree, the eastern hemlock, is being killed by 2 invasive pests, the hemlock woolly adelgid and the elongate hemlock scale. Massive old-growth hemlocks are being lost each year throughout Appalachia from these diseases. The American beech, which is already struggling with beech bark disease thanks to a non-native scale insect, is now under attack from an introduced nematode that is believed to cause beech leaf disease. This new disease is now rapidly spreading throughout the northeastern US, and current estimates suggest that up to 90% of our beech trees will be wiped out. And this is not just exclusive to the eastern US. In 2019, the Mediterranean oak borer, a non-native ambrosia beetle, was found infecting and killing valley oak trees in a few counties in California, with potential to spread throughout. White pine blister rust, a fungus native to Europe, is killing numerous native white pine species along the west coast and into western Canada. So how does this keep happening? Where are these pests coming from, and how are they getting here? Well, there are 2 major reasons. The first is bringing over imported plants from other regions of the world, and the second is shipping materials across the world. Over the last 100+ years, there's been a large demand for non-native or exotic plants to use in our landscapes. This demand for exotic non-native plants sometimes involves importing plants as seedlings from overseas, and they usually arrive in pots with soil from the plant's original home. And sometimes this soil or the plant itself can carry non-native pests, typically fungi or other microscopic organisms, that have the potential to become invasive when they arrive in their new range. This is originally how the chestnut blight fungus was introduced, when Japanese chestnuts were imported overseas for breeding and planting here in the US. Other invasive pathogens like beech bark disease and the hemlock woolly adelgid are believed to have originated in this manner as well, with folks wanting to plant exotic beeches and hemlocks. In fact, this shocking 2012 study found that nearly 70% of forest insects and pathogens established in the US between 1860 and 2006 most likely entered on imported live plants. That is really disturbing, because not only do we have to worry about the possibility of these imported plants becoming an issue in wild spaces, but we have to worry about any potential pathogens that they may carry with them as well. This really shows that if we simply decrease our demand for exotic plants in our landscapes, we can prevent a lot of these pests from causing harm to our native ecosystems. Outside of importing plants directly, pests can also be transported across seas via shipping crates and materials, particularly those made of wood. For example, the emerald ash borer was believed to have been introduced in this way, and since its discovery in the 90s, it has decimated native ash trees throughout large parts of this country. The Asian longhorn beetle also arrived in this way, and it threatens species of maples, willows, and birches. Upon their discovery, US and Canadian officials helped to develop an international standard which required shipping containers made of wood to be treated for insects that may be hitching a ride. This standard has cut the amount of insect introductions in half, but the millions of containers entering the country each year are still bound to bring some potentially dangerous insects. So for some, it may be difficult to understand why these pests are so problematic. After all, we have thousands and thousands of native insects and fungi, right? Why are we worried about just a few that we accidentally introduced from overseas? For example, there's actually a native ash-boring beetle in the eastern US that's closely related to the emerald ash borer. These beetles are pretty similar, so why has the non-native emerald ash borer been so destructive while our native ash borer is virtually unheard of? The biggest reason lies in the evolutionary histories of these insects and plants. The native ash borer has co-evolved with our native ash trees here in North America for millions of years. So over time, this results in a relative homeostasis where the plant generally has evolved good defenses against the native insects, but some of the insects are still able to infect their hosts and survive. In the case of the native ash borer, it primarily infects dying or dead ash branches from trees who may be stressed by something else already, but it doesn't really infect or cause issues for healthy, unstressed trees. On the other hand, North America's native ash trees did not evolve with the emerald ash borer, which is native to Asia. And when we accidentally introduce these pests to North America, our trees virtually have no defenses against their attacks. And the result has been shocking. An estimated 99% of native ash trees in the eastern US could potentially die from the emerald ash borer, with hundreds of millions of trees already killed. And to make things worse, there's usually a much less stringent set of checks and balances in the pest's new range compared to its native range. So when we accidentally introduce a pest from overseas, we don't bring along with it all the predators, the parasites, and the diseases that affect it and keep it in check in its native range. For example, the spotted lanternfly was accidentally introduced around 2014 in Pennsylvania, and it has quickly spread through neighboring states in the eastern US. Populations of the spotted lanternfly were incredibly high in the first few years after it reached this new area, largely because it lacked predators. The same is true for the hemlock woolly adelgid in the eastern US, where it continues to kill eastern and Carolina hemlocks. Now, researchers are exploring biocontrol methods, where they take predators of this insect from its native range and see if we can intentionally release them into the US to reduce the invasive insect's dominance. It seems a bit counterintuitive to release additional non-native insects just to keep another one at bay, but really thorough research is necessary before doing so to make sure that there are no unintentional consequences. So ultimately, why does this matter? What kinds of other impacts will this have? Oftentimes, tree species in a forest or woodland ecosystem are known as keystone species, meaning that they contribute a disproportionately large percentage of that ecosystem's complexity and function. Removing keystone species from an ecosystem will significantly decrease the functionality of that ecosystem. It's like removing a compressor from an air conditioner and wondering why it's not cooling. Losing a tree species can greatly impact wildlife populations and have even caused some species to go extinct. Some insects have evolved a specialist relationship that is highly dependent on a certain tree species. When the American chestnut declined, 5 native moth species who were mainly American chestnut specialists are believed to have gone extinct. And according to this study, 21 ash-feeding insects are threatened by the decline of ash trees due to the emerald ash borer. Another really sad thing about losing a large percentage of a species is the loss of genetic diversity. These species have spent millennia evolving to their environment, and over a species' entire range, the genetic diversity can be quite large. So when an introduced pest comes through a certain area, it puts the species into a really fine genetic bottleneck. That's because only a tiny percentage of that population will have some tolerance or resistance to the pest, and will be able to survive to pass on their genes. The rest of the population that has no resistance will likely die off, and their genetic information is lost. This makes a species more vulnerable to extinction or local extirpation events. It increases the risk of negative inbreeding effects, and it reduces the species' ability to adapt to change. And of course, these invasive pests have economic consequences as well. Most of them will fall on homeowners and local municipalities who will end up paying for removal costs and who will lose property value when these mature trees die. The loss of trees from streets, yards, and parks also affects aesthetics, shading, stormwater runoff, human health, and much more. In total, between all introduced pests, the cost is estimated to be in the billions each year.
So is the situation hopeless, or is there anything that we can do as individuals or as a society to prevent this?
Certainly the best thing we can do is to plant native species within our landscapes and on our properties, and to encourage all of our neighbors, our friends, coworkers, and anyone else who will listen to do the same. This will decrease the demand for non-native exotic species that are so common in landscapes today, and thus will decrease the demand for importing new plants from overseas. We have such incredible biodiversity in North America. Let's celebrate and share what we have here. Next, we can reduce or eliminate the amount of goods or supplies that we as individuals purchase from overseas. This is also just a generally good environmental practice because it reduces the amount of greenhouse gas emissions to get those items to you. And if you can find a source closer to home, more of your money is staying local and helping your community or state or whatever. If we can reduce those foreign-made items, we'll reduce the demand for shipping overseas and thus reduce the risk of accidental stowaways on these shipments. Another thing you can do is be more cognizant of moving wood. Once these pests are already here, one of the most common ways that they are spread to different areas is through infected firewood or timber. Instead of taking firewood with you for long distances, buy local firewood once you get to the campsite or wherever you're going. We can also use citizen science platforms like iNaturalist to learn about and to help track these invasive pests in your area. You can report any unusual findings to your state's agriculture department or to the USDA's APHIS program. You can also use TreeSnap to observe survivor or resistant trees in your area, which may help scientists track how these tree species are responding. And lastly, we must educate. We need everyday people to become aware of these issues and to learn how they affect our ecosystems and our way of life as well. It's honestly really sad to me that the general public, most people, have no idea that these issues are going on in our woodlands. We as a society generally value money and wealth over everything else, including our environment. If we can save a few $100 by buying something that's 3,000 miles away and shipping it across the world, we generally are going to do that. People typically don't view our ecosystems as critical to our way of life. The same view is generally held by our federal government too. They have the power to strengthen the defenses against pest arrival and establishment, but it's not even close to being a priority. In fact, during the Trump administration's and Doge's attempt to streamline the federal government, they fired hundreds of USDA and APHIS workers who are responsible for pest detection and crop protection. Instead of strengthening our efforts, they're defunding them. In a more positive light, the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies has advocated for a tree smart trade, urging those within our federal government to make changes to the current system that would reduce the risk of pest importation and ecosystem disruption. I don't want this video to make you lose hope. If we should remember one thing, it's that the natural world is resilient. And in fact, there is evidence that some species have experienced similar rapid declines and have recovered in the past. A good example is the eastern hemlock. About 5,500 years ago, the hemlock saw a drastic decline in its population across its range in eastern North America. Scientists believe that this decline took place because of a rapid shift in climatic conditions that resulted in a long, dry, warm period. Insect pests also probably played a role in this decline at the time, and it took about 1,000 years for the hemlock to recover from this. When we take a step back and look at the larger geologic timescale, this is a good reminder that our native trees have gone through many periods of ups and downs as climate or other environmental conditions shifted over the millennia. We also have scientific research on our side, and as long as we continue to keep funding science and believing in the scientific process, I personally have hope that we will be able to use these findings to help solve these issues in the not so distant future. And most importantly, I don't want to discourage you from land stewardship in your own community. In my experience, land stewardship is one of the most fulfilling feelings, and it will instill you with hope for the future. And now more than ever, we need more folks going out and taking care of their local ecosystems. So get out there and find some issues that are happening in your area and work towards improving them. It will leave you feeling great.
And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you like learning about native plants and trees, consider subscribing here. I'm Andrew the Arborist. Thanks for watching and take care.